Here we go. Renegade Accelerator fall enrollment is open. We are in the early decision deadline period. So that means you can save money on tuition. We do have limited seats and there has been a wait list. So head to renegadeaccelerator.com and fill out the application if you're interested. And if you're not sure, just sign up for our emails. We will take you through a process that helps you determine whether or not the program is the right fit for you. The constant feedback I'm hearing from Renegade grads is that they join the program for the curriculum, for the education, for the mindset shift, for the tangible, tactical results. However, they don't realize what they're also getting is a lifelong community that is a mosaic of like-minded, like-hearted women who just continue to accelerate each other way beyond the program. And that is because when you graduate from the Renegade Accelerator, you're invited into the Renegade Collective. This is our alumni network, and we have ongoing programming. We have the ability to connect on a daily basis, network, help each other, and it's pure magic. Head to renegadeaccelerator.com and you will find a video of Renegade grads who explain their experience, share what they've learned, and share their actual results. And you can always reach out to me as well if you have questions. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it. Imagine the ROI of investing 8 weeks into your own personal and professional growth. Head to renegadeaccelerator.com. Enrollment is open for our fall program. This opportunity is for female leaders, executives, founders, who are looking to 10x the way they think and execute. The program is equal parts education, collaboration, and accountability. It's all virtual, but it's live, interactive, real-time learning. And the curriculum includes everything from building your personal brand online to public speaking, podcasting, publishing, productizing your intellectual property, and even marketing partnerships. We also focus on wealth creation. My goal is to help you create a healthier relationship with both time and money. Head to renegadeaccelerator.com.
I love the blend or the intersection of creativity and business. I really feel like that's where success is. It's where the best ideas come from. All of these skills and tactics and tools around creativity that I learned as a poet were things that I was able to apply to my work life.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step.
Just let go.
We have Stephanie Paterik on the show today. She's a recent Renegade Accelerator graduate, and she's the editor-in-chief and senior vice president of Adweek, the industry's most trusted source for news and insights about advertising, marketing, and media innovation. She's an award-winning journalist. She rose from freelance copy editor to a member of the Office of the CEO in 6 years. And along the way, she discovered a love for the newsroom and the boardroom. And Stephanie believes that the magic happens at the intersection of business and creativity. In this conversation, Stephanie shares how she got started a why not now story that really shaped the entire journey of her life and her career. Prior to Adweek, Stephanie covered the travel industry for newspapers like the Arizona Republic and the Wall Street Journal. She owned a writing and consulting business, and she was a research assistant for a best-selling author. As a Phoenix native, she earned a journalism degree from Arizona State University. Go ASU and our Sun Devils. And she also has a poetry MFA from the New School. Without further ado, here is Stephanie. Stephanie, welcome to the Why Not Now show. I am jazzed to have you here with us today. And in the spirit of Why Not Now, let's hop in. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now?
Amy Jo, I'm so happy to be talking with you today. And I love this question. I love looking back because I've had a few why not now moments, but I think the biggest one for me that really changed the course of my life and my career was a time when I had been a journalist for several years and I made the decision to quit my job, move to New York from Phoenix, and become a poet. And weirdly, what felt like a detour led me to my role as editor-in-chief of Adweek.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about this. And down the road in a few minutes, we have to talk about our ASU days and a little bit of that overlap because we were on campus at the same time. So you head to New York City with this vision. Tell us about the moment you decided or when you got there and this dream and vision and then how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, it was not so neat and tidy at the time. It was a series of why not now moments. What prompted it was my husband and I are both journalists. And at the time I was 28, we were engaged. We were both working as journalists in Phoenix. I was managing editor of a magazine, and he had an opportunity to take a really big job in New York. And so we had this big decision to make, but it meant me quitting my job and moving. So it was like, do we stay in Phoenix and kind of have this comfortable life surrounded by our family, or do we take this leap? And for me, it was a really big leap of moving to a new city that I'd only visited twice and sort of having faith that I would kind of make my way again. And we decided to take that leap. And the timing was interesting because this was January of 2009. So it was as the housing market had crashed, the economy was going downhill. Everyone told me, don't do this. You're not going to find a job. There are like no jobs in New York right now. But I was very confident. I had worked since I was 14. And I was like, I've never had a problem before. And it was our first night in New York. And I started to realize, oh my gosh, tomorrow when we wake up, my husband is going to go to his job. And what am I going to do? And I've worked literally since I was 14. What am I going to do? And he said, why not do something you've never been able to do? Like, why not take a couple of months and do something crazy or follow your bliss and then get back into it? And so that night I Googled, I knew right away what I wanted to do. I wanted to take a poetry class. I had always wanted to. And I'd been like a secret poet, my whole life. And so I Googled poetry class, New York City, found one that started in 2 days and kind of dove into this world of poetry and didn't really end up getting back into journalism full time for 5 years. It was supposed to be a couple of months. And instead, I really ended up sort of pursuing this road of poetry and starting an editorial consulting business. Which was not at all what I thought I was there to do.
Oh, I love that prompt, though, that your husband had with, why don't you do something you've never been able to do? What a gift, what an exciting question for everyone listening. What would you do if someone asked you that question and you had every ability to? I think it's a good way to kind of expose what you might be longing to do, right? That's so cool. And then fast forward, so how then did you end up at Adweek?
Yeah, so, I ended up, it was interesting to me. So for me, I am a big believer in the phrase that you need to see it to be it. it's really important for me to have role models. And so I was trying to find my way as this poet, but who also, had a passion for journalism. And I ended up coming across, I was actually at a used bookstore, flipping through a box of $2 books out on the sidewalk in the village, and found this poetry book by a man named David Lehman. And I turned it over and I looked at his bio, and he was a journalist. He worked for Newsweek for years, but ended up launching the Best American Poetry Anthology and led the Poetry MFA at the New School. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can do this. I'm not crazy. There's a model for kind of blending these two worlds. And so I ended up applying, got into the program at the New School, and became his research assistant and worked with him for 2 years. So he became this amazing mentor to me where, I worked with him on that anthology and hosting these amazing events with some of the most celebrated poets of our generation and beyond. And then on the side, I started a consulting business, an editorial, journalism consulting business. And he really kind of helped advise me on both of those. So I got to this point where I was able to exist in both worlds. And one of my clients for that business was Adweek. And first, the first time I came on board was for a really simple assignment. It was copy editing an issue, helping them close an issue while their copy chief was out. And then they brought me back for what was supposed to be a 2-month assignment to help get a digital operation off the ground. They were really kind of a print focused publication. This was about 7 years ago. And they had a new chief content officer who was interested in really kind of bringing the publication into the future and getting a digital operation going. And so they brought me on board to figure out how to do that. And one thing led to another. I'm constantly committing to things for 2 months that become several years. And yeah, they ended up bringing me on, full time. And I've held, I think, 5 different roles there in the past 6 or 7 years. And this year stepped into the editor-in-chief seat.
Amazing. And I mean, I think knowing you and some of the color around how you can juggle the business side and the journalism side and the creative, and it's this kind of beautiful blend, this little cauldron. We've talked before about, and even in the Renegade program, about that newsroom and the boardroom. I imagine the skills from both are really valuable and leveraged. I know we talk a lot about storytelling around data, storytelling around business, and trying to persuade. And so can you share a little bit about what it's like to be in, the role you're in now, but also as an executive, and you have one foot on both sides, right, of the fence, the journalism, news, and also the business side.
I love the blend or the intersection of creativity and business. I really feel like that's where success is. It's where the best ideas come from. Something that shocked me was that my business really took off after I graduated with an MFA in poetry. And I really saw it as a departure. I saw it as, this is something I'm doing for myself. It's not necessarily going to make me money or improve my career. It's just a passion. And I think a lot of my journalism friends thought I had lost my mind, But what I found was that it really made me a better journalist. It made me a better, entrepreneur. All of these skills and tactics and tools around creativity that I learned as a poet were things that I was able to apply to my work life. And it's something that I have, as my role has, grown and expanded, I've brought those lessons with me. And, a few are, one is the idea of storytelling is so critical. And I think that executives forget about that. They can become really, sort of focused on, we're here to talk about business, and creativity is seen as this frivolous thing that happens on the other side of the house. But we're all human. When we're sitting in a boardroom, right, we're all human, and humans respond to stories. And, so Amy Jo, you and I have talked about the fact, I had an opportunity to help sell the company. I was part of an executive team that sold Adweek last year. We have new owners. And I think a big part of my approach in helping sell Adweek was telling the story of Adweek, telling the story of that evolution from a print publication to an omni-channel multimedia company that's all about community. So that's one benefit. I think another is, any artists out there, if you've ever taken a creative writing workshop, you'll be familiar with the workshop model, which is that every time you get together as a class, you bring work. You bring photocopies of a poem, for example, and you pass it out and you read your work out loud, and everyone goes around the room and gives you feedback. And that's an incredible, for me, that was the thing honestly, it's the reason why it took me so long in my life to ever take a poetry class or to pursue creative writing, because that felt so vulnerable. But taking a class like that teaches you how to show up with vulnerability, to speak up, to use your voice, to put out ideas that are maybe raw and not perfect and not fully formed, and letting a community help you refine those. And I learned so much from my teachers who were able to create a space where that was possible. I think about that so much. I lead a team of about 50 people, and I think a lot about creating a space where creativity can flourish and making people feel safe to bring those ideas to the table.
I love it. That is so interesting how that process and the vulnerability of getting that feedback loop with something that's so sacred and personal, sometimes your creative expression, how that has helped you grow and then bring that back into your team. And the fact that you got to use your journalism skills to sell the company, and go through that process of M&A is, I think that's exciting. That's definitely where creativity and business intersect. I mean, it's a huge deal. I have a mentor who says, sharing your ideas, especially on social media or anywhere out in the world, is like skinny dipping in the pool of public opinion. And I just love that phrase because it's true. So Kenny Tomlin says that, and he's been on the show. The idea of owning your voice and some of the things that you've done along the way to be able to really harness and step into your power. We were talking a little before the show about this. What are the tips? What are some of the things that have helped you speak up and realize you have to be able to speak up in order to, go where you want to go?
I think one of the biggest lessons I've had to learn in my life is how to speak up, is how to own my voice. And I remember even as a student, as a high school student, I remember having an English teacher pull me aside, and she was like, I know that you have good ideas and I need you to speak up and be a leader more. This class needs to hear your perspective. My first job as a reporter at the Arizona Republic, I had a manager who pulled me aside and said the same thing. She's like, you're not speaking up in meetings, and I know you have stuff to say. Why aren't you saying it? So it's feedback I got early in my life and early in my career. And as I started to step into management, it was hard. I often found myself sitting at a table where I would count around the room the number of women to men. And often it was like, it was like 5 men and 1 woman, and that was me. Or it was 2 women and 12 men. And I think, that's one factor that led to some intimidation. And I remember feeling like the conversation whizzing by. It was like this train I couldn't quite catch. Like, oh, I have something. I'm going to try to find my moment. Where can I inject it? Oh, the moment has passed me by. And so some tips, what I have learned now, it's second nature. I don't think twice about speaking up in a meeting, but I can go back in time and empathize with younger employees who are struggling with that. I think one is exposure therapy. Man, it really works. I mean, I think just, putting yourself in the position of speaking, of leading meetings, not using any intimidation or fear you have around speaking up to take yourself out of the game. Use that. And every time you're in a meeting, look, this is a chance for me to get more comfortable with my voice. It's the same thing going back to those creative writing workshops. I'm terrified of this, but I'm going to do it anyway. A second is, I think, really finding allies in the room. I think it's so important, whether it's a manager, whether it's a colleague, to talk with someone and say, just be honest, I have ideas and I'm having trouble finding an in this meeting. can we help each other out? And just having someone in the meeting who's like, I think Stephanie has something to say, or you know what, she just made a really important point here. Like, let's talk about that a little more. So not going it alone, like really finding your community in that room. And then also I think like this is very tactical, but talking first. Like if you know what I mean? Like jump in and get that first word, get it over with, break the ice within yourself immediately so that you're on the table and you're not left just trying to catch that train.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us.
I love these, and the exposure therapy, the allies in the room too. And even when the allies you have in rooms that you're not in, right? So there's a fellow renegade. She says, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And it's so important to have, from a personal branding standpoint, people who will speak up for you too. But finding those allies in the room. There's a story that I know that you have in your back pocket because it's a go-to story that I've heard, and I'd love if you could share to set the stage. So Stephanie and I we didn't know each other, but both attended Arizona State University a few years ago. And I think it was the #1 party school in America at the time. We didn't know each other, but I'm sure we crossed paths on that campus of 100,000 people. But there is a story that I love it so much. I'd love if you could share of how you started in your career. And this was a moment of owning your voice because there's a line in it that I will never forget. So if that's not like a prompt, would you mind sharing?
Yes, I will share this story. So yeah, I had a moment early on where I really speaking up kind of changed the course of my life. So it was a summer before I was starting school, summer before my freshman year in college. And I wanted so desperately to be a journalist. Like I was the kid who in 6th grade put a proposal in front of my principal to start a school newspaper. I knew this was something I wanted to do. And over the summer, so my dream was working at the campus paper, which was the State Press. And I even spent the summer volunteering for the paper and writing just to try to prove myself and get which felt like a very coveted spot on the staff come fall. And so anyway, it comes to the end of summer and I'm descending the stairs into the basement of this building called the Matthews Center, where the newspaper was produced. It was called The Dungeon. And I sat down with this student editor named Chris who interviewed me. And I brought like this huge binder. I mean, it's embarrassing now. It was like this huge binder of everything I'd written for like my high school newspaper and every essay I'd written. Those were my clips. That was like what I had for my writing samples. And I interviewed for this position and, went back to my parents' house because I hadn't moved onto campus yet and waited for the phone to ring. And the phone rang and it was Chris. And I answered the phone and I was so ready to say yes. I was just sure that this job was mine. And he ended up saying, you know what, Stephanie, I'm so sorry, but I don't have a spot for you on the paper. And I was like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. And he just said, you're too young. You're a freshman at ASU. You're going to want to party and you don't have time for this job. Like give yourself a little time. And I remember, my first thought was like, oh my God, maybe this isn't my path, or maybe I'm not as good as I thought or whatever. And I almost hung up the phone, but there was this little voice in my head that said, Stephanie, speak up before you hang up. And so I I forced myself to say something. And I said, Chris, I got to tell you, you're making a huge mistake. I promise you that I'm ready for this. This is why I'm here. I'm here to do this job and I'm going to work harder than anybody else in the dungeon if you hire me. But I respect your decision. Have a nice life. And, went about my way. And the next day the phone rang again and it was Chris, to my surprise. And he said, you know what? I can't get out of my head what you said. and I'm going to give you a shot. There's actually a spot for you. And the crazy part of this story is that Chris and I have now been married for 12 years, and we have 2 kids, and we're both working journalists in New York. But it's something I always go back and I'm like, if I had not listened to that voice in my head, where would I be? My life might look completely different.
Oh, I have goosebumps like the whole time. The speak up before you hang up. And that's such a good story. I remember hearing it for the first time. I was listening to your video, and I think I was like getting ready, and all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, she married Chris. And my husband said, what are you doing? What are you listening to? I was so just, kind of struck and moved by how that even wrapped up. But how cool is that? So if there's anyone listening, I hope that that's inspiration, because your life could look a lot different if you hadn't spoken up before you hung up. Oh, I love it. Let's talk a little bit about leadership. So you mentioned, you're leading, you have 50 people on your team. You have shared before, you tend to lead from you have an empathetic leadership style, and that there really is no right or wrong way, right? For leadership, it's in terms of style. And I know you've navigated some really tough situations recently. Can you talk a little bit about your style and just, things that you might be learning even with recent scenarios?
Yeah. Something I've been hit with, and I think a lot of women have been hit with, is a 2, what I call a 2. So you're too this, you're too that. And for me, it's been, you're too nice. Like that's the feedback I've gotten my whole career. You're too nice. And what I think that really is referring to is that I do have an empathetic leadership style. I care about the people I work with, right? I'm not interested in being a dictator. I'm not interested in top-down edicts. I'm interested in, like I talked about before, making a team feel comfortable enough to surface their best ideas, to pull the best ideas out of the collective. And I see myself as a facilitator. And you have to recognize and value every person in the room to lead that way. So I just reject the idea that there is one way to be a leader. Like there's this, preferred leadership style. I think there's so many ways to be a leader. And I think that's kind of fascinating to let that play out, right? So for me, I think, this can really come up in sometimes really hard situations. Amy Jo, our newsroom suffered a loss just a little over a month ago. One of our editors passed away suddenly. And it was this really kind of scary and difficult but crucial leadership moment of sharing the news with the team and helping the team navigate this grief and this loss, which are not necessarily emotions people are used to bringing into the newsroom or bringing into a business setting. And so, I really made a conscious decision to lead with empathy, and one, lead with vulnerability and not pretend to have it all together. You know what I mean? To be honest with my staff about how it was affecting me and how it might affect them, and that was okay. I really preached flexibility. I think that there is this culture in American business of we push through adversity no matter what. You just keep showing up. You just work through it. There's not time for grief, right? We've got a 24-hour news cycle. And my message to the team was like, take time. Grief is weird and it's unpredictable and it'll hit you when you don't expect it. And if you need to just take an hour or take a day or take a week, do it. And I realized that for them to believe me, I had to do it myself. And so I actually took a day off and I went and checked into a hotel and gave myself like a day away from work and a day away even from family and just let myself grieve and let myself process. And I shared that with them. And I said, you can do it because I did it. This is not something where I'm like preaching it, but I don't really want you to. So it's as hard as that, one takeaway I'll share with you that I actually got from a mentor and Adweek's chairman, Antonio Lucio, who headed up marketing at Facebook for years, and I think is just an absolute legend in the marketing world and such an empathetic leader himself, told me that these moments of crisis within a company have an opportunity to make or break the culture. It is a chance to kind of set the culture in a whole new direction or to set it backward. And he felt like taking this empathetic approach really did a lot for our culture. So these moments are hard. You never want them to happen, right? I'd be happy if we never had to deal with loss, but recognizing those moments for what they are, I think as a leader is really important. And you can't overthink how you handle them.
Just that right there, and you can't overthink how you handle them, is huge, because that means you're being you, and you're navigating from a compass that's probably a little deeper than what logic might start to dictate. That's a lot. And it's interesting how I imagine that experience alone, it really kind of pushes you forward in terms of having to step up, and also show that vulnerability at the same time. I appreciate you sharing that story. And it's something that, others that are listening, there's been so much loss and so much grief, especially over this last year. And there's a lot of leaders that listen, and just to know that there really is not one right way, and how your empathetic style has actually become such a stability and strength for culture.
I think too that the past year and a half, just during the pandemic, has given all of us in leadership such a good opportunity to practice vulnerability. I think I actually feel like there's an increased recognition of a need for this style. And there's been a chance for us to be more exposed with our team. It's like I'm working from home and working from my 5-year-old son's bedroom, right? And sometimes he's popping in, or you can hear my baby crying. And those are things that before I would have almost devastated me, oh no one can know that I have a life, and now it's no, this is who I am. These are, this is what I'm juggling. This is what my life looks like. And I'm human too. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. That doesn't have to erode our authority, right? It can strengthen our connection with our team.
Absolutely. That humanizing and relatability. And yeah, absolutely. It's kind of surreal speaking to you right now, because when we were both going to ASU and I studied marketing, and then got my first job at an ad agency, I remember when Adweek would arrive at the agency, and it was all the creatives had it and knew what was going on. And it was the holy grail of, the industry, and that masthead just meant so much. And now I'm interviewing the editor-in-chief, and it just it's full circle. It's such a kind of surreal moment. So thank you for sharing your time. One kind of last point I want to touch on, one area. So it seems you've really kind of taken a stride in that work-life integration versus separation in terms of how you show up online, and specifically with social communication. So how has your experience been with that? And anything that you would share as, of note for others who are flirting with the idea?
Amy Jo, you have been a huge help to me with this. So I'm glad we're talking about this, because I think part of this gets into your zone of genius that I am learning from. But I do think I used to be, and I'm still recovering from it, but very segmented in my thinking. It's I have my work life and I have my home life, and they are these two separate things. And as I said, in the last year, that's gone by the wayside, right? It's all converging. And so how do I get more comfortable with that, and particularly in showing up as that whole person online? So I really, in terms of my social presence, I love Instagram, but I see it as a really intimate forum, and it's where I love to talk about my kids and my home and all that personal stuff. And then I see, LinkedIn as the more professional, here's the latest story on Adweek. And I've been experimenting the last couple of months, with just bringing those worlds together. And you said something to me that unlocked it for me, because I was well, I'm not sure how to start sharing Adweek stuff and journalism stuff and business stuff on Instagram. It just and you're like, well, Stephanie, it's not like you're selling refrigerators, like, and no offense to the refrigerator salespeople out there, but that, she was like, I would actually be really fascinated if I was going through your Instagram stories to hear, like, what are you seeing out there in the ad world, in the marketing world, and how it's dovetailing with culture. And so I realized, like, oh, okay, it is. I don't have to just put it in the work box. It's part of me, and it's interesting to all of us, whether we work in the ad industry or not. So yeah, I've been bringing the two together. I've also, I've been really going at it from the lens of elevating my team and elevating the industry. But like I feel more comfortable that way. It's not about me and it's not about the latest thing I did, but it's like, look at all of the work these amazing 50 people are doing. Like, I feel like I now feel like I'd be doing them a disservice if I was not out there sharing and evangelizing, what they're doing. So that's part of how I've gotten comfortable with it. And, like one recent post, talk about bringing together personal life and work life, is I spoke at a retail event, like an event for marketers in the retail world. And I'd made this prediction that this year we're going to see the holiday shopping season start earlier. Everyone is so, tired of the pandemic and ready for something to celebrate, ready for something cheerful. And so to start preparing now. And then like the next day, my 5-year-old was like, Mom, can we make a gingerbread house? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's playing out in my home. And so so we made a gingerbread house, and I shared a photo of that, and I shared that story, and sort of weaving in, again, this sort of professional prediction with how I'm seeing it play out in real life. And it got really great engagement. So it's fun to experiment with it, Amy Jo.
That's such a great story, by the way. Just yesterday, Lincoln said he wanted to be Christmas for Halloween. And I was like, okay, right on. See, it's this, you've manifested something here. You're onto something. But to see that integration, and what I'm craving too is I would love to see your touch on it. What's the point of view you have? Because you're at this hub and we're all willing to, we find convenience and curation very valuable. So you're seeing things and in a spot, an epicenter that not very many people are. So your point of view, the trends and just the recaps and things are extremely valuable. So I've appreciated your content for sure, and sharing your voice more. Okay, so if we were to go back to the Matthews Center, it's the Matthews Center, right? So you're on the ASU campus. I think I had one journalism class in that building. It was underneath, but I don't think I was in the actual dungeon. If you were to go back to yourself in that moment when, you were getting ready to walk in to pitch your binder to Chris, who's now your spouse, and just say something to her, what would you say to her?
Keep showing up for yourself.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, I think that's what it's about. I mean, like fighting through, despite anything that might hold you back, the idea of like, I'm not experienced enough, or I'm not this enough, or I'm too this or too that. Just no, I'm going to keep showing up for myself and believe that I will find my way. Right. And I think the second thing is like, it's going to work out, but not how you thought. I don't know about you, but I had this idea of like, I want to be an editor of a magazine, and here's step 1, step 2, step 3, and there I am. And it's like, no, it's so much more interesting than that.
Isn't that the truth? Like, you can't even imagine what is possible. So don't try to overbake it, right? Overcook it, but go bigger. Like whatever that idea is, 10x it. Because my dream was Madison Avenue. I just want to go to New York and work at an ad agency, right? That Jennifer Aniston film, I forget what the name is, but it was like, I want to be in the high rise. I want to be pitching. And then here I am speaking with you, and the road has been so much more colorful than I would have ever imagined. And I would never choose anything different. So you're exactly right. Keep showing up for yourself, and it's going to work out, just not how you thought.
Our newsroom is on Madison Avenue. So next time you're in New York, you come and you can say, I made it to Madison Avenue.
kid in a candy store, just bright eyes, and you're going to have to stop me from taking photos and IG stories. So
I'm glad you took the path you did.
Me too. It definitely worked out better than I could have imagined so far. It's such a journey unfolding every day. But thank you for joining us and for being a renegade, saying yes, and sharing your wisdom and time today.
Amy Jo, thanks so much. It's been a total pleasure to join you.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?